Hi, this is Cora Stack again, Dr. Stack. Another issue I wanted to draw attention to, and I've written a paper about. Again, it's a very contentious and difficult issue, and I think we need to face up to it. I'm being the Angela Merkel here, saying, she was a great woman for facing up to things, and she got a lot of stick. But anyway, she's one of my favourite female politicians of all time. One of the ones I most admire. I really admired her in so many ways. I thought she was fantastic. So she was my number one female politician for many years, and we miss her really because she had some. She had some characteristics and some qualities. She was amazing, and she was very generous. Really, she was very generous towards migrants. She was in a way that was really exceptional. Very exceptional, fantastic woman. One of these people that I have massive admiration for in terms of how she handled, particularly the migration issue, and she would have faced considerable, slack, I suppose, but she did it because it was the right thing to do. So she was very a fantastic woman altogether, and hugely missed in terms of her inner strength, and not putting up with any nonsense. So what I'm doing here is the paper is called. You'd wish you'd have somebody like her around at the moment. So balanced human rights with respectful and sustainable immigration policy in Ireland, a two-pronged approach. I listen to a lot of people, and I talk to a lot of people, and I get very different perspectives, and I try to see the both sides of the equation, and just read what's happening through what's happening in the newspapers and the media, and hear all the stories. Some you hear from different sources. Not everything is always perhaps sometimes things are people try to keep things kind of calm and that, but I think the issue needs to be handled better. I think we are where we are, so no point in talking about what we should have done or what we might have done or what could have been done in the past. We have to see where we should go from here. We have responsibilities that we've signed up to, so but we have to just not honour them in terms of in a particular limited way. We have to really balance, give immigrants human rights, and at the same time balance that with the rights of people who are paying indirectly through their taxes, services, and all of that. As I say, the ordinary person going out to work sometimes feel grieved, perhaps because they feel, in any case, that they're over, they're paying too much for everything, and they're ending up with nothing. Exactly what I'm talking about, being burnt out, and paying everything, and paying extortionate energy bills and everything like this, and they're ending up with nothing at the end of the month. And there's a lot of people in that category. A lot of families are struggling, and there's no point in saying that there aren't. There are. There's a small number, maybe 15%, maybe 20%, if we were to say, and then there's 60%, maybe 50-60% of ordinary, decent working people who are going out to work and who feel, that it's a struggle for them to try and meet their bills from month to month. So, and this is an issue then that can become contentious in a situation where you have a large section struggling, because it's not that they're looking for something to blame, but it can sometimes, be well, these, if we didn't have these, everything would be okay. In my opinion, that's possibly not the case, but nevertheless, I think they do. People have a point that the current the current migration policy is not working. I think that's a fair point, and I'm offering some solutions for consideration. And if anybody has a better solution, I'm very happy to listen to what they have to say. If they can improve this, make it better, do a better job, delighted to hear their perspective and to have it implemented. Absolutely delighted. But what I am saying straight out is that our migration policies at the moment is not working. Can we go back and can we say, send everybody home to their countries right now? No, we can't. We can't do that. Much as people will say, oh, we should send them back. That is not going to happen. It's not realistic, and we have made obligations, we have signed treaties, we have signed agreements, and we have to honour those agreements. But that doesn't mean doing what we're doing now in terms of dealing with the situation, I think. So I'm looking for more balance and a fairer system that's fair to migrants and fair to ordinary workers. You know, a balance between the human rights of both and the rights of both. So in the interest of cohesion in society, a better society, a fairer society, and a more compassionate society. So if we're letting ourselves down really by not having policies which are fair to all and which respect the dignity and respect of all. So my abstract, or my initial point here is summary is migration policy in Ireland. This is very contentious now for a lot of people. So I completely understand this, and I think it's very difficult. But I think we need to have a conversation and a respectful dialogue about solutions in the current climate, just where we are now. Migration policy in Ireland, as in many states, sits at the contested intersection of human rights commitments, domestic socioeconomic pressures, and public opinion. This paper proposes a two-pronged policy framework for reconciling the ethical imperative to protect migrants' dignity with the practical need for social cohesion and economic sustainability. Drawing upon international human rights law, comparative migration studies, and Irish socio-economic data, it outlines 1. Pathways for migrant integration through employment, arts, education, and 2. Sustainable skill-based return mechanisms for voluntary repatriation. The paper also examines public frustration at perceived policy inequities, particularly among the squeezed middle, and proposed targeted domestic measures to maintain support for humane migration policy. So I think we have to understand that there is significant public frustration at perceived inequalities at the moment, and particularly among that large group of the squeezed middle. Migration in the 21st century is shaped by complete interdependencies: climate change, geopolitical instability, economic inequality, and the increasing interconnectedness of labour markets. Ireland, traditionally a country of emigration, has now experienced significant inward migration over the past 3 decades. That's from 2024 CSO. While this has enriched culture and economic life, it has also generated, and there's no point in saying otherwise, significant tensions over housing, public services, and social integration. The current policy environment is characterised by long-term accommodation of asylum seekers in temporary facilities, particularly hotels, without meaningful engagement in work or education. Perceptions among some citizens that migration policy is unbalanced and lacks transparency. Limited mechanisms for voluntary skills-based return to countries of origin. Now, you would like, really, if you were to be fair to migrants, that if you were returning them to their country of origin, that they would have gained some skills or got some, benefit from their time in Ireland, rather than being put up in a hotel and be locked up. It's just no more like a prison, and hidden away, more or less. This is completely unacceptable, and it is degrading and dehumanising, in my opinion. This paper seeks to reframe the debate through a two-pronged approach grounded in both human rights principles and pragmatic governance. Now, just we are a democratic nation within Europe, and just to say what we have signed up to and what our obligations are. I mean, we can't do a cherry picking approach to what we've signed up to. But Ireland is a signatory to the European Convention on Human Rights and a member state of the European Union, thus bound by Article 14 ECHR, prohibition of discrimination. Article 2 of Protocol number 4, freedom of movement. EU Reception Conditions Directive, guaranteeing humane living conditions for asylum seekers. However, international law also recognises the sovereignty of states to regulate entry, residence and return, provided such measures comply with proportionality, necessity and non-discrimination principles. That's from a paper in 2004. Comparative Policy Landscape 3. Other jurisdictions offer models for balancing rights with sustainability. Let's look at what other jurisdictions are doing. Canada. Temporary foreign worker programs and defined skills training objectives. Portugal. Integration through voluntary vocational education tied to labour markets gaps. I think Portugal has a good, in terms of what we need in Ireland, I think Portugal has a good policy here. Integration through vocational education tied to labour market gaps. I think we haven't addressed that in our migration policy. That alone would be a huge step given our own huge issues with labour market gaps, particularly in the vocational and the trade sector. And I think there's nothing wrong with providing that education and offering it to those who can, contribute in a positive way and make a contribution and feel better about themselves. And then people watching them feeling, well, they are contributing and we're delighted to have them and, fair play to them. And it's great that they are contributing and that's good for everybody. Norway. Structured voluntary return schemes combining financial incentives with skills certification. So you have these different policies in these different countries. So the lessons for Ireland include early labour market access, reduces welfare dependency and accelerates integration. So that's very important, I think, that early labour market access, which is not available to most migrants at the moment, or most asylum seekers. I'd also say exactly what Portugal are doing, or they're offering vocational education tied to that will be important, but that mightn't suit everybody. But certainly, if you also allow some access to labour market access that reduces welfare dependency. This is a huge issue for people. They're looking at migrants and they're saying they're dependent on all these. Well, they wouldn't be dependent on so much welfare if they had access to the labour market, which is reasonable to say that saying that they're taking all our welfare. They're overly dependent on our welfare. That's maybe a point, but if we're not offering labour market access, then I think it's been unfair and inhumane to these people, and accelerates integration. So it accelerates integration. Return programs are more effective when linked to economic opportunities in the countries of origin. That's true because we see Polish people now. A lot of our Polish people who did an awful lot of fantastic work for us for years have now returned to Poland because they're Poland is on the rise. So that's something that's very true. So the two-pronged approach I'm outlining or I'm suggesting is 4.1, integration to work and education. I'm saying that we should consider, is this the fairer way forward, given where we are now? Migrants should be enabled to contribute economically and socially from the earliest feasible point, especially in sectors experiencing shortages. This now would align with the Portuguese, some version of the Portuguese integration model. Proposed areas of engagement include construction of housing, direct involvement in building, retrofitting homes, infrastructure projects, transport, energy, and water networks. I mean, didn't the Irish do this in, rebuild America and rebuild or build England, like this, and earned a living? Health and social care, addressing staffing deficits in hospitals and care facilities, that's already happening. Education and training, English language provision, vocational certification, and recognition of prior qualifications. So all of these things I think could be considered and reflected upon to see would this offer a better way forward for a more cohesive society and a more humane society and a better balance of human rights and more human rights for migrants, which would be accepted and by squeeze middle who feel hard done by because they see so many getting benefits rather than perhaps seeing that these people are not allowed to work and that they could contribute if they were allowed to work in these areas. That's the other way of looking at it, which is the way I prefer to look at it. And I'd like to see this piloted again. If you pilot it, for a year, piloted so many, a percentage, see how that works, and then if that worked, move to a bigger number and so on. So I think our current policy is failing, and it's generating kind of I won't say racism, but it's hostility, a lot of bad feeling between different sections in Irish economy, and it's certainly not helping the mental health of either, and in particular the mental health of the so many migrants. So we are in one way respecting our obligation, in another way by doing what we're doing and kind of hiding the problem in hotels. We are really being hypocritical in the way we are not being fair to migrants. If we at this point now we can't change the past, but I think we're not being fair, and this will result in in a worsening deterioration of the current situation if we don't change our policy. And I think people of all strata accept fair policy solutions, and if we see our migrants helping out and working, getting educated, less dependent on welfare, going out, joining in society and befriending others, helping other people, I think we would have a much better attitude, and we would change our, if there was somebody there that needed a bit of company and a nice person came in, and helped out, or helped, if you go into a lot of the care homes, there are a huge amount of migrants there doing the work, and they're fantastic. They really are. They're absolutely fantastic, and they're so professional by and large. They're helping the most vulnerable. So in Ireland, because I've been in these care homes where I've been shocked, as I say, from what I'm seeing, because I kind of see everything, but not that I. But I see, I observe like what's going on, not in a bad way, but just to see the systems and that. But it's surprising. It is a lot of migrants that are helping the most vulnerable in care homes, and the extremely vulnerable people. It's are being helped by migrants. So they, to say that these migrants have no value is really not telling the truth, because nobody, if they're all in these care homes doing so much hard work, these people are not all bad people, inverted commas. An awful lot of them are top class, excellent people. So not all of them are, they're like all other strata. There's a lot of them that are very decent and really want to work and want to contribute. Sustainable skill-based return pathways. For those whose legal stay concludes, we should develop bilateral agreements for qualification recognition, offer business startup grants for returnees, provide mentoring links between Irish employers and home country enterprises, ensure voluntary nature, informed consent in all return processes. Now, I see this is quite difficult at the moment for migrants from places that are extremely war-torn, but if things turned around, say in Ukraine or other places, if things turned around, then certainly I think we should consider this, and we should consider it as a long-term strategy anyway, along with the other ones. Addressing public domestic concerns. Public support for migration policy is contingent on perceived fairness. I always have the belief that if you're fair to everybody, that really balances out any kind of problem with trouble later on with regard to the issue. Fairness. If people are treated fairly, generally speaking, they'll accept a fair solution. I find that that's something that innately people are comfortable with, and they really have no grievance with fairness. That's one good thing I think about our people, is that we have this in all of us. We have a sense of fairness, and I think people can accept a sense of fairness, and they kind of know innately what it is. So I'm saying that public support for migration policy is contingent on perceived fairness. For the squeeze middle, now this is what I'm asking for, that I think we need to, be cognizant and be aware of the struggles of the squeeze middle, and irrespective of where the stresses are coming from that they perceive, they need a spotlight on their issues, and they perhaps feel all the spotlight is on the migrants, only in the one sense of just putting them up, not necessarily in terms of their other more fundamental rights, which are very important for their mental and physical health and well-being, which are also extremely important areas of human rights obligations, in my opinion. Maybe not explicitly written down, but certainly when you look at what other countries are doing, they're treating their migrants better, and they will have better, outcomes for their communities and societies as a result of it. So they're looking long term rather than short term. But I think we have to address the domestic public concerns. There's no point in putting our head in the sand and saying that there isn't serious public concerns for migration policies contingent on perceived fairness. For the squeeze middle, reforms that could help address these issues, this perceived unfairness, could targeted tax relief for median income houses. Now, we were told recently there will be no tax relief for middle earners in the budget. I really think that's a mistake. I think it's a mistake in view of all these other things that are going on. I think that's misguided, and I hope that there will be some changes to that, as there are a lot of changes. That targeted tax relief for median income houses, I think that is absolutely necessary, given that they are feeling so squeezed, and after the election they're actually feeling even worse squeeze, and very disappointed. I think that there was a promise that going out to work would be made worthwhile, which is a reasonably good promise, and this is what's needed, I think. Tax relief, and what are we going to do about the the huge increase in food, and eat less of it, as somebody said to me. That might suit us, but no, not that. Targeted consume less, fish be less, consume less, but targeted tax relief, I think that's very important for median income households. Enhanced childcare subsidies, priority housing measures for long-term residents, institutionalised public policy consultation in migration policy design. I think that's reasonable. to have institutionalised public consultation and migration policy combined. But of all of those, I think targeted tax relief for median income households, I think, might, give people that boost that they can pay their bills and might help them, and even if it was, you can't couch it in, well, look, we understand that you do feel aggrieved about, public services going to migrants who are not allowed to work. But I think we have to face up to the fact that if we refuse to allow them to work or engage in social life in a healthy way, we are really not complying to the word or the letter with our human rights obligations under the acts and treaties we signed, or acts that we signed, or agreements that we signed that I referred to up there. So let me look at the next thing is ethical considerations. So all of these are difficult issues. But if we put fairness, and put ourselves in their shoes, and then put ourselves in the middle income category shoes, try and put ourselves in both the shoes of the migrant that's in a hotel, can't go out, stays there 24/7, locked up basically. And this is our, respecting our obligations under all our treaties, or our agreements that we signed into. Then the ordinary squeezed middle person who's struggling to pay the bills and exhausted, burnt out, as I say, from struggles and from too many bills and more bills, and not able to pay their way, not getting enough breaks, and feeling just overwhelmed. And there's a lot of people in that category. There's no point in saying there isn't. Well, if they are, I'm meeting an awful lot of them, and I'm talking to them, and I'm asking them for their opinion, because I'm trying to get a sense of where these people are at. And I mean, students are in that category as well. Students are really struggling with trying to, meet all their obligations, go into college, pay for their fees, attend their lectures. A lot of them have to work part-time to pay their way. Huge problems with transport, getting into work, getting into college, no accommodation, huge problems with trying to find affordable accommodation. And I've heard about, in a lot of places, Galway for example, landlords are keeping students 4 days a week, and then doing Airbnb and making more money, and then sending them home. I mean, I don't think that should be allowed. I don't think it should be allowed. I mean, that to me is not treating students with dignity and respect. It's not fair to students, and they're getting huge money for this. And it's not fair, and I don't think that should be allowed. And I think if a landlord was in that position,